It's a pleasure to be here, and I know again it's happy you're here. So when Sean and I were talking about what would be interesting to talk about today, one of the things that I've had some really interesting background in is entrepreneurship. And this is primarily because I spent, as Sean said, some of my time at the Kauffman Foundation here in Kansas City. I think for us in Kansas City, we don't often, maybe you do, but I think for what I have found is many people don't realize what an absolute jewel we have in the Kauffman Foundation here in Kansas City. Not only is there a tremendous resource available to us as citizens in this area, but just the ongoing knowledge that they provide, research that they provide, there's so much there. So with my time at Kauffman, I became interested obviously in entrepreneurship, but I started to notice some really specific trends when it came to demographics as it pertained to entrepreneurship. So my talk today is really about success strategies for female entrepreneurs. This was based on some research I did when I was with Kauffman. And again, when we were talking about this particular talk here for you guys at Johnson County, I wanted to be more broad than just talking about female entrepreneurs, because the things I'm going to talk about today really apply to anybody that's interested in entrepreneurship. So if you'll allow me, I'll couch it as this is what I'm showing you for females, but really this is applicable across the board. So, but specific to women, I went and did some more recent research in terms of trends. And again, with today being election day, we've heard a lot about demographics in the news. But for me, that was particularly interesting because we're continuing to see waves of different types of demographics entering entrepreneurial endeavors. And so for women, just a few stats. Right now, as of this 2018, approximately 11.6 million businesses are owned by women. These businesses employ approximately 9 million workers, and they generate a tremendous amount in sales. I will tell you that the last time I'd done some research in this area was closer to 2014, and these numbers have risen fairly significantly since 2014. So again, the trend line is headed in the right way. I thought it was interesting too, the top 5 industries tend to be health, beauty, fitness, retail, business services, food and restaurant, and cleaning and maintenance. So we're seeing a lot of those. We're also seeing, as I'd mentioned, this increase, year over year, about an 18% increase in female-owned businesses. And then finally, women business owners oftentimes tend to be more educated than their male counterparts, with at least having an associate's degree. A lot of reasons for this, but oftentimes, and you've probably heard this with just the Bill Gates and those sorts of things, a lot of times people drop out of college to pursue their entrepreneurial endeavors. It does tend to look like that women will tend to forge through and finish their associates before dropping out. When I started really thinking and looking at these trends for female entrepreneurs, again, back in the early, like 2012, 2013, it became apparent to me that not only were the numbers for females not high, but there were always some interesting things that would happen. So I've done these sort of talks over the years numerous times, and it's so interesting that almost inevitably, after I will do a talk about entrepreneurship, inevitably, 1, 2, 3, any number of women would come up to me afterwards and say, I've always wanted to start a business, but, and then they'd fill in the blank with their reasons for not having done it. And a lot of those reasons were self-doubt, not sure if they can afford it, don't think that they have the right understanding or background or knowledge. And so at some point I thought, I really need to kind of gather these sorts of objections and write a book about it, because the self-doubt that the females are fearing is not any different than what the males would tell me as well. But the women wouldn't act on it when oftentimes the men would take action. So that was kind of the basis for my book I called SheVENTURE. And even today, I will continue, you'll see on my Twitter feed, I continue to tweet under the SheVENTURE handle. There's so much that's going on in this space, and I think it's going to continue to grow. So I thought it'd be interesting to tell you my story and kind of how I got to where I was at that point and then how I got to where I am today. So in 1994, I was approached. I'll back up even before 1994. When I went to college, I was certain that I was going to be an attorney. And for my entire life, I'd always planned on being an attorney. Even after I got out of college, I took my LSAT. I was accepted at UMKC. So I was on that path to pursue a law degree. But by nature, I tend to be a little bit on the conservative side as it pertains to like not having all my eggs in one basket. So when I was in college, not only did I had two bachelor's degrees and like 2 majors, 2 minors, but one of my majors was secondary education because I thought if I don't go to law school, I could always have a teaching degree and I could fall back on that if I needed to. Now, back when I graduated, teaching degrees were life certifications. So I could always go back and teach school. So my senior year in college, I was doing my student teaching, and I found I really, really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the teaching, I enjoyed the students, and just the whole dynamics of it. So I ended up graduating, taking my LSAT, as I mentioned, getting accepted to law school, and I went to my parents and said, you know, I think I'm just going to take a year's pause. What today is called a gap year. There was no such thing in my time, but I said I'm going to take a pause for a year, and I think I'm going to teach for a year. And so I ended up taking a job, and because we're here in Kansas City, you guys will know this general area. My first job was at 16th and Paseo. It was in a school called the St. Joseph School. I was the 5th teacher in 1 year. 4 teachers before me had quit or been fired. And so I was just like, this is going to be great. This is going to be the best experience. So I forfeited law school that year for a teaching job where my salary was $8,000. And so I ended up teaching that year, and I really, really did enjoy it. And I planned on staying there, actually, but the next year they lowered our salaries to $6,000 a year. So I'm like, I can't make ends meet on 8, much less 6. So I ended up taking a job in industry. And at this point, I'm still thinking I'm going to go to law school, but I just kind of kept pushing it off for some reason. So I ended up getting a job in industry at what used to be down on Bannister Road, the old Allied Signal plant. And in that big facility, there's every kind of manufacturing you can fathom, because we made non-nuclear components for nuclear weapons. So I ended up learning a tremendous amount about manufacturing, never thinking I would end up using that. But at this point, I sort of took my eye off my ball from a professional standpoint. I was in my early 20s, and I ended up dating this guy, and I thought he was just the most fun. And so we continued to date, and pretty soon we ended up getting married, and then we started our family. And before I knew it, I'd spent 9 or 10 years at this facility, and by this point it became pretty clear I was never going to go to law school, right? But I gained all this really bizarre and unique and actually valuable information as it pertained to manufacturing. I ended up getting a call. I'd gone back to school and got my master's degree in the evenings and was teaching college. I taught at Longview and some of the other community colleges here locally. I got a call from the American Management Association. And they said, we're really interested in having you come in and write some training for us, because it's not very often you find somebody that can teach, and I'd had now at this point plenty of, at least some exposure to teaching in the public school, Catholic school, and then colleges, and then this manufacturing background. So these intersection, they said, this doesn't happen very often. Would you be interested in writing some training for us? And I said, sure. I'd be happy to. It was shop floor design and layout was the training I was writing for them. And so they say, if you're going to write the training, we'd like you to take it and go on the road with it, at least pilot it for us. So I took vacation. I had written the training, and I ended up going out and delivering that, and had a ball. And so so if you can follow the trajectory, I went from teaching junior high and high school history and math, then teaching business, and then getting into training. So this whole theme of teaching actually ended up being the pathway I was supposed to be on. In order to train, you have to be an independent contractor. So in my mind, I was taking vacation from my employer, so it wasn't that big a deal. I gave no thought to a legal entity and that I had to form a legal entity and that I needed a name for my legal entity. But in order to get paid, I had to form that. So I turned my LLC paperwork into the state of Missouri. I gave zero thought to the name of my entity, so I named it Michele Markey and Associates, and thinking this is just a vehicle for me to be able to get paid, right? Again, not really thinking into the future any more than where I was at that given point in time. This ended up serving me for a certain number of years, but over time I'm going to share with you how this came back to not suit me well. So more and more, I started getting more and more calls from the American Management Association. Again, my background was unique enough that there just weren't that many people that were able to bring that kind of skill set to the table. But I was, what I would call myself, was an accidental entrepreneur. I had, again, no planning on my name, no thought structure around my legal entity, no consideration with regard to a brand or any of the normal constructs around what people think of when they want to start something that is going to hopefully provide them an income to continue to grow their company or grow their business. So what I like to say, I was accidental. I had very little, if any, formal business planning. My undergrad degrees are, again, political science and social studies, secondary ed, and psychology. So no business at all. So I had no planning, I did no business development. I was basically hoping that they would continue to call me. Now, the interesting thing is, I was at the right place at the right time, but I was also prepared. So I ended up getting calls more and more and more frequently to come do this work. And at a certain point I said, you know, I think I could make this be my full-time endeavor. So I left my employer and went out on my own. All my eggs, I will tell you, were in one basket. I was with the American Management Association, which Barb and I were just talking about, at College and Row, is where it used to be, under the name of Paget Thompson. I did a lot of training for them. I wrote a lot of training for them, and anything I could do, but it was all in that one area. Again, I was not thinking in any way, shape, or form in a way that was going to give me a longevity in this field. I needed to be more intentional, so I knew ultimately, years later, I needed a strategic plan. I needed to expand my network here in Kansas City, most importantly, and really just grow my understanding of a business. So I needed to kind of broaden my exposure and frankly, broaden my own knowledge. So here's what I did. I thought to myself, well, you know, I just need to make myself more marketable. So I was already doing manufacturing-based training, so manufacturing, shop floor design and layout, those simple sorts of things. So in my mind, the way that I was going to become more valuable was by spreading my capabilities further. So what I did was I went and got certified as an OSHA trainer. If you have manufacturing, you know they need to have OSHA. So I got certified as an OSHA 501 trainer. That made sense to me. After that, I thought, well, you know, in addition to that, manufacturing organizations are, rightfully so, have so many issues with regard to compliance, specifically Department of Transportation, because they're moving their materials from one spot to the other. So I became knowledgeable in all the compliance-based things, Department of Transportation types of training, things like that. So I kept kind of growing my capabilities. So now I could write OSHA training, I could deliver OSHA training, I could do manufacturing, I could do any of those different things. It was, for me, it was a great way to grow my business. But I will share with you very specifically, I was still thinking like an employee. I was not thinking as an entrepreneur. And I would tell you, I didn't even have the words in my mind to think of myself as an entrepreneur. I was thinking as an employee, I was thinking, how do I get more valuable so that if something happens, I have all these different alternatives. And frankly, it did keep me very busy. This is similar to what my calendar looked like. So if I were on the road, I was earning money. But if I was home, that was just a day that I earned no money. So I was motivated to be traveling all the time. So for years, I would leave our house on Sunday evening and return either Thursday night or Friday night for weeks on end. Now, keep in mind at this point, I have this husband and I have 3 children, and it's just our lives are crazy. And so I will tell you, this is what I look like. 99% of the time, it was craziness. Again, I want to stress, I was not working smart. I was working really, really hard and doing really well, but it came at certainly at a huge price. I like to call this a high-class problem to have, and that's what it was. It was a very high-class problem. I needed to switch my thinking to be more entrepreneurial and to be much smarter about how I was conducting not only my business, but it was only me. It was me, myself, and I. I'd never considered, should I bring on other people? Should I, get any kind of back office support? I was doing my own books. I was doing my own, financial books, doing my own marketing. I was doing everything. So it was limited. It was very limited in how far I could go with it. When I started to think more as an entrepreneur, this is how I felt versus the harried look. Okay? So what I really want to talk with you about today are what I consider the top 5 success strategies for any entrepreneur, whether you're a female or a male. These are the things that I have found that have at least made me most successful. The first thing is to be really clear about what your vision is. I like to talk about your vision and what it looks like for you, but let me give you a different analogy. So when I started thinking about what is my vision, and where do I want to go, what do I want it to look like, this is an example I'm going to share with you. Years ago, one of the things I had decided that I wanted to do, just as a kind of on my personal side as a goal, is I decided I wanted to run a marathon. And I hadn't been a real long distance runner at all, but I just felt like it was a really great goal to set for myself. So I went to Gary Gribble's down here, and I needed a good pair of tennis shoes. So I got this pair of tennis shoes, and as I was paying for them, right by the register was this little flyer, a whole stack of flyers. And the flyer was for a marathon training group. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is a perfect timing, because I tried to train on my own a little bit using some online kind of training plans, but there were too many things I didn't know. And so I thought, this is going to be great. So I got the flyer and I put it in my bag, and I'm like, yes, this is going to be good. So I get home, and this group was going to start within the span of a couple weeks. And as time got closer, the more I started doubting myself. And I thought, if I go to this training group, it's going to be a bunch of young guys that are probably really fast, and here I am, 40 whatever, not fast, and I'm going to be like odd man out. I'm going to feel weird, right? I don't know anybody, and I'm not very fast, and I don't know what I'm doing, and these people are probably all really stellar runners. So I didn't go. I talked myself out of it because I didn't think I looked like they looked. When I think about entrepreneurs, and I think this happens a lot, and this is what I keep hearing, and again, the reason I wrote the book. When we hear entrepreneurs, and specifically for women, we think Bill Gates, we think Steve Jobs, we think Mark Zuckerberg. Those are the images that many people have of entrepreneurs, and they don't look like me. I'm not Silicon Valley, I'm not Ivy League, I'm not brilliant. I don't have this completely novel idea. I deliver training, I write training. This is not novel. So I let my perception of what I felt like was an entrepreneur get in my head. And so I didn't go to that running club, and I didn't help myself become an entrepreneur. Now I will share with you, at the time I didn't know this, but marathons typically are fall marathons, spring marathons. And I just happened to hit the timing right when I was there. So at the time came, I needed a new pair of shoes. I go back to Gary Gribble's, and I go in, and I'm like, another flyer. And I'm like, is this a consistent thing? And they're like, no, it's just for the fall marathons. And I'm like, oh. So I picked it up in my bag and took it home. And that time, I actually did go to the meeting. Again, this one right down here. And what I found was a room full of people that were, as you can just well imagine, all ages, from really young guys to people that, were retired. men, women, all shapes and all sizes. See, I had in my mind that runners look like that, and I'm like, not that, you know, and I'm like, but it was a room full of people like a cross-section of you know, our community. So I think entrepreneurs are the same. And when I think about myself as a business owner, and I was solo for a long time, a lot of people would say, that's not really an entrepreneur. And I think to myself, those words are the disservice that we continue to hear. Entrepreneurs are people that are finding a way to generate business and generate income doing something that they have a passion for or something they love. And that comes in whether you own a bakery or you run a tech endeavor or a retail. It can be any number of things. So when I say the first thing to be clear about, define your vision, define a vision that works for you, for what you're interested in, for what you think is your passion and your vision. I like to, when we talk with groups of entrepreneurs, sometimes people will say, what's your 3-year vision? And I think to myself, that's fine, but I also feel probably more passionate around saying, go 1 year. You know what? Let's get a bite size. What are you going to do over the course of the next year? That to me is manageable. 3 years, while it's good, is very long. And we'll get there eventually, but let's just put one foot in front of the other to get started. What are you going to do over the course of the next year? Where are you today, and how are you going to get to your 1-year vision? This is a tool that I used, and I found that a lot of people have used something similar. And I really debated about sharing this, at least initially, because I thought people will think that this is, you know, silly or whatever. But then I'm like, you know what? That's the same reason I talked myself out of running the marathon, worrying about those sorts of things. So here's what I did. Each year, I mean, it's historically at Kaufman, we close down mid-December through the first of the year. So for me, that's tended to be a good time for just to level set, what is my next year going to look like? So something that I have found extremely useful is I create a vision board for myself. What are the things in the course of the next year that I want to keep front of mind? Unlike New Year's resolutions, I am going to make a commitment to myself. So simply, this is a PowerPoint that I created for myself. I sent it to Walgreens. I had some 5x7s and an 8x10 printed, and I put them in various places where I knew that I would every day have that in front of me. So when I decided that after all these different times that I've gone and done these talks, and all these different people that come up to me afterwards and say, I've always wanted to start my own business, and fill in with their self-doubt, I thought, I've got to get that book written. I have got to take those sorts of things and get that book written. So you can see right here, that was the cover of the book. I hadn't written the inside yet, but I had my artwork done. So every day I'm looking at that saying, this is what I need to make sure that I make strides toward accomplishing for myself this year. Just a different one, the ladies at the top, those are the ladies that ultimately I will share with you. We've now run many, many marathons together. So I, at this point, have completed 6 full marathons and probably at least 50 half marathons. And this year I'll be doing Rock the Parkway half marathon. So making a commitment to yourself in a way, whatever works for you is useful. But for me, this is something that has worked very well for me. So, path forward, step 1, what's your 1-year vision? Think about that. Just a few tips for you, and I won't read them to you, but I will share one with you that if I could pick anything off this page, it's the second one. Don't limit yourself. Think big. When I decided I wanted to run a marathon, I didn't say, oh, I'm going to do a 5K. I want to do a marathon. Don't think small. So a different example. Once I started thinking about growing my training business, it became apparent, I guess, to me, as I mentioned to you, I was working so hard. It was like digging an in-ground swimming pool with a little shovel. I was doing all the work myself. I needed to leverage much different types of resources if I wanted to grow that business. Now think about, mine was manufacturing. That was the area I was most well known for. OSHA, DOT, avoiding harassment, discrimination, HR compliance. And I thought to myself, you know, the other thing that's like a real common with a lot of manufacturing is a lot of those organizations are not first language English speaking for much of their workforce. And when you're talking about safety, you don't want to just check the box. And a lot of companies do that. You know, we've delivered it, everybody got to attend it, we're good, we're legal. I think when you deliver safety training, the real issue is making sure people have the information they need to actually be working in a safe environment and for them to understand that. So I ended up bringing on a trainer whose first language is Spanish to deliver the same sorts of training. So when I say think big, I never had considered having, and I didn't hire her, I had her as a 1099, which is a contract associate, but it was a way for me to grow a business and continue to support what I felt was a mission and vision for my business. Okay, does that make sense? So push yourselves to think much bigger. Okay, the second strategy, and I have found this to be critical, getting out and networking with a wide variety of people. So I know several of you here, I mean, the fact that you're here is really, I mean, shows that your propensity toward this. In Kansas City, we have each week 1 million cups, which is held, where is it, at the Kauffman Foundation still? That's what it was, Westport, I thought they just moved. So every Wednesday from 9 to 10, you can go, it's no cost to you, it's free, and it is a community of entrepreneurs and other individuals that are just active in the community. You'll be amazed at the group of people you can meet here. And here at Johnson County Community College, you have tremendous resources. Getting out and getting connected in those ways are invaluable to you. So it's interesting because November we have Global Entrepreneurship Week, so you'll see in Kansas City, again, we're fortunate because the foundation is here, and the foundation really was kind of the beginnings of what we call GEW. We're here in Kansas City, but in Kansas City during Global Entrepreneurship Week, there are hundreds of different meetups that are available. Most of them are free, not all, but if they have a cost, they're nominal. It's an amazing opportunity, not only to get connected, but to learn what all is going on in our city. The other thing is SourceLink. If you're ever interested in finding out what resources are available to you via, most of the time, our tax dollars or via grants, SourceLink, which is down at 4747 Troost, right by UMKC, is a wealth of resource knowledge. You can access them online, you can go down there and visit with them, but there's virtually anything you need you can get here in the greater Kansas City area very quickly. With some of the most, I will just say in my opinion, some of the most incredible resources in this USA are here in Kansas City. We have access to an amazing amount of them. So when you think about this, what's your one-year vision? So we're basically setting the goalposts here. Where do I want to go? Where am I today, right? And then we'll start thinking about what do I need to do to close the gap. But those are the two things, the first two. The third strategy then is to say, okay, if this is where I am today and this is where I want to go, what do I need to do in order to close the gap? How can I bring those closer together? So some examples. Oftentimes, one of the biggest complaints or fears, I use the word fear, is people will say, in fact, when we would teach a fast track course, which is entrepreneurial education, and I know Barb will say the same thing and Sean as well, the night or the afternoon or whatever, the session when we're talking about business financials, people's heads immediately just go down. They're like, don't talk to me, don't ask me a question because I don't get it. And I want to say to them, don't worry. 99% of the people in this room also would tell you separately, they don't get it either. So that's just a common fear. So if you don't know business financials, it's okay. There are a million ways to learn. You don't have to become an accountant any more than we don't have to become attorneys, right? We go to attorneys for legal advice. We can go to accounting and bookkeeping for that kind of advice. Nevertheless, your business financials, should you go this path, will always be the documents that tell you the health and wellness of your organization. They will tell you and inform you with regard to decisions that you need to make. I liken your business financials to getting your physical at the doctor. It just is, it gives you a good understanding of the current situation. And it may not be that for you. Maybe it's something else. Either way, there are a lot of different opportunities for you to get out there. I know there are many, many, many resources here at Johnson County Community College for you to jump in and learn more about what it would take for you to launch a business. Is it feasible? And if it is feasible, can you actually launch it? Will anybody care? Will anybody pay you for what it is? There's also Kaufman Fast Track, which I want to share with you, is that used to be a program, and you can still go take a course. And is it still delivered here to some degree? It's in the city, but not that one. So that's an excellent resource. The Fast Track course, I will tell you, is online. Before I left Kaufman in April, I just left in April, we had just updated all that content and we digitized it all. So it's available for free to anyone, anywhere, anytime. So you can log on at any point and take a self-paced online learning. If you want to attend a course, that's available as well. So your goalposts, and then identifying the gaps. And then the fourth strategy is to really learn about who's going to be interested in this business endeavor, who's going to want to buy your product, who's your target market. Okay? Where are they from? I was talking with a entrepreneur that I'm going to be mentoring, and her business launched in 2012, and she's had some measure of success. She's had enough success that she's able to continue to operate, I guess. She's not growing really rapidly, but she's operating. So one of the things I said to her is, help me understand your market. Who specifically are you going after? Who's your target market? And her response to me was everyone. It is everyone. And she said, and I've had people like you tell me before, if you say everyone, then you're not really saying anyone. She said, but everybody else is wrong. It is everyone. And I'm like, okay. So we have some good mentoring opportunity here, because we really do need to be very specific about who is it that we're really targeting. You know, what's their occupation, their location, their income, their gender? How do you get to them? So understanding who is really going to be the group of folks that you're going after is critical. Okay? And I liken that to saying, how do you figure out how to be competitive? In the world that we live in right now, and it's probably been like this for a long time, but there's more noise than ever. There's more competition for our attention, for our dollars, for everything. So finding a way to be relevant in a marketplace that is increasingly busy and crowded is a full-time endeavor. Okay? I wanted to add a fifth success strategy, and I thought about this when I wrote my book, because I think when we talk about launching endeavors, we tend to go with the most standard components of business planning: the financials, the legals, the marketing, those sorts of things. But I think there's something to be said for doing well by doing good. And so I'm going to share, in fact, I'll show you the picture, a story of an entrepreneur by the name of Liz Bohannon. Liz Bohannon is a Kansas City native. She grew up in Blue Springs, and she went to school at Mizzou. Liz, just by her very nature, and she would tell you this in her own presentation, she's very anti-capitalist. She's more very focused on trying to do good for everybody, and you know, capitalism is bad and things like that. So when she got out of college, she had an internship at one of the big ad agencies here in Kansas City. And she was sitting at her desk, and she hadn't been there, you know, much more than a month. And she's just like, this is not for me. This is taking me down a path that I just doesn't align with my heart. And so I'm going to leave. And so she'd been doing some research about a not-for-profit agency in Africa that was trying to help the local economy. This young lady at 22 quit her job, bought a one-way ticket to Africa, and was going to save the world. And so I even said to her, I'm like, oh my goodness, what did your mother say? Because I would be crazy if my kids did that. But either way, she did that. And she ends up going to Uganda. And her first endeavor with this group, while noble, was not everything that she was hoping it would be. So she was left with, now what? But this is a really interesting story, because I'll give you kind of a punchline before I get to the whole endeavor. She's been on Shark Tank. Now, she did not get funded, but she's done something pretty phenomenal, phenomenal enough to land her on Shark Tank. So what she realized when she got to Uganda was that aside from the other organizations she'd been dealing with, that she had noticed that there was, the women in particular were struggling in that local economy. So the way it's set up there is once you graduate high school, there is a standard gap in time that all students go through before they start college, or what they call university. That gap in time has been designed to allow those students an opportunity to go get a job, earn some money, and be able to help pay for some of their college, because their economy is obviously very different than ours. And so for women, the jobs are not plentiful, and so many women weren't ever getting to go to college. And in fact, what was happening was for a decent number of these women, they were falling into the sex trades and some things that were just lifetime kind of circular sentences of not success. So Liz started a company, and what this company does is it's a sandal company. So she has the sole of the sandal is crafted, but what she does, and with her team, they sew these really beautiful colored straps that can be tied a million different ways. And that seems pretty simple, and it is simple, and it was simple, but it was really interesting because what she was able to do was get these girls straight out of high school, teach them a trade in terms of learning how to sew and operate these machines. And when they sold the sandals, what Liz does and would do is hold back a portion of the sale and put it into like a trust account for them. They'd get a little bit of it, but she'd put it back, and when they had enough saved, then she would scholarship them, or she scholarships them to go to university. Fast forward to today, and I think she's 28 maybe by now. They've put more than 50 women through this program and through college. I'm going to give you the name of her company because she has some really cool videos I want you to go look at. She tells her story much better than I can, but it's such a cool story. So it's Seiko Designs, S-S-E-K-O, Seiko Designs. Not only do they do the sandals, but they also do some beautiful leather purses, and now they've branched out into a number of different products. But when Liz was forming her company, she, again, keeping in mind that she thought capitalism was not that, so she thought she'd be a not-for-profit. What she ended up learning was that for-profit companies can actually do a tremendous amount of good. So what she would tell you is she's a not just for profit. So a good portion of her income still goes to support these programs. But I think to myself, her story, and hers is very noble and very, very noble. By the way, she doesn't live in Kansas City anymore. She and her husband have moved to Portland. I think they live in a commune in Portland, but they spend a fair amount of time in Uganda where her company is. When she was on Shark Tank, as I said, they didn't end up getting funded, but they got tremendous exposure, and her company is doing incredibly well. And in my mind, when I think about this, and I added this to my book, so I wanted to add it to this talk, I personally will tell you that in my personal belief that it's one thing to launch and build and grow a business, and I am all about that. I love business more than anybody, but I also feel like there's a really interesting component that is worthy of putting on the table for you as a consideration, and that is there an aspect to your business that also can do good, right? Can it help somebody? Can it aid something else? And I'm not saying it's a necessity, but I do think there's some goodness around doing well by doing good, and that's what Liz embodies as far as I'm concerned. That is a group of her graduates. Some have gone on, many have different types of careers, some have come back and are working for Seiko, but it's an amazing organization. So I'm going to leave you with this. When I go and have the opportunity to do these talks, if you're like me, I get really like, oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do my one-year plan, I'm going to start thinking through this, and I do really well, and then a little bit of time passes, a little bit of time more, and pretty soon it's like, 3 months in and I haven't made progress. So I want you to think about your one-year vision, but here's my challenge to you. What are you going to do differently in the next 30 days? If we were to meet back here December 6th, what would you be doing differently, or what progress would you have made from today to that day? I'm going to give you one more video that you might want to go and take a look at. It's a little bit lighthearted, but it just sums this up. It's a TED Talk. It's less than 4 minutes. It's 3 something. The guy's name is Matt Cutts, C-U-T-T-S. And at the time, he was an engineer for Google. And his whole thing is, what are you going to do differently in the next 30 days? And that's, I think, the way that I like to send us is, how do we get to the 1-year vision is one thing, but how do you get that 1 foot in front of the next is how to get started. All right. Thank you for everything. This is my contact info. If you're interested, I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. Or any comments, for that matter.
You had mentioned that at one point in time your first LLC didn't serve you well, but I don't think you ever got back to that story.
Yeah. The question was, at first my LLC at Michele Markey & Associates didn't serve me well, and that's a great point. So here's what I found. When I finally made the decision that I wanted to go beyond being a solo entrepreneur, and I wanted to bring on the 1099 to do the Spanish training, and then ultimately I had more people that I ended up bringing on to do a variety of other things, so I could go after much larger contracts. When, in the world of training, unlike law firms or doctors' offices, in the world of training, when your company is named after you, they expect you. Because it's so much in training is built on your reputation. So people will say, I've heard Michele, I've attended Michele's training, or this or that. So when I would try and grow my business, they would expect or assume that it was going to be me. So I ended up turning into the state of Missouri a DBA, doing business as, and rebranded as Heartland Training Associates. So, yeah, great question. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you guys coming today, and have a great afternoon. 30 days.